So
I want to just also, because there is this, I know there's an implication right now, and I think you could easily glean out of this that this is all because of increased resources. And let's not forget that the district made an intentional decision about how it allocated its resources.
Amen.
Yes, we did use school improvement grant money for John Marshall High School. Okay, but again, the district, under its authority of local control, decided to align its resources to what it thought was important. So it did, of the, 14 schools?
15 all.
There are 15 schools. 14 of the 15 schools are being funded locally that are not the result of the Department of Ed giving them money.
And I've said that forever, Tony. I says, the reality is we have to decide where the wars are, and that's where we send our armies. It makes more sense.
I think what the district has done under Gene's leadership is they've created a model which should be able to be used anywhere in the country. There is no such thing as one school being bad. It's typically a feeder school, a feeder zone schools who feed one another from kindergarten or pre-K all the way up to high school. And I think that this was a bold kind of a move, unproven, nobody's done it. We'll know, well, the jury's out. But if this works, it's a model that can be transported not only to different sections of IPS itself, but other places in particular across the state. And you fix 15 schools instead of 1.
Well, Skip, you say it hasn't been proven, yet the practices that you're presenting as far as coaching, teaching,
Yeah.
those are proven.
Those are proven. I'm
So-
talking about doing a 15 feeder zone.
I appreciate that, but your practices are research based, and so I don't want to do that. Okay, just so my clarification, you said 600,000.
I think that's the number.
Now, is that from the Department of Ed, or is
Yes.
that for all 14 schools?
No, that's the Department of Ed for one school.
Okay.
But you're able to develop things that you can duplicate.
Yeah.
And then the other 14, so there's, you're getting startup really for 14.
Right.
And the other issue that I was going to ask, that I think is being missed in a lot of corporations, is in order for the local corporation to do that collaboration, they have to kind of sift through and audit and find that money, which is a huge issue. The whole auditing of what is a best practice at a local level is a big deal.
So, Gene White, let me just say how it happened, because this is very important. We challenged Gene. We said, if you really want to do this, then you're going to have to organize abandon. You're going to have to look at what you're doing and decide what you don't need to do anymore to get more focus in this direction. And actually, it was his idea on the plan, and he decided to do it, so he pulled everybody together and said, we're going to change direction and focus, and I'm asking each of you now to rethink how you spend your money. So we're going to put money to this instead of things that are not working. And there's no secret, they have budget problems.
Yeah. Well, I
right?
raised
And
this
they
issue.
decided to do it.
I raise the issue because as we go forward in Common Core and local corporations decide what they're going to use, what I see happening in some corporations, not all, but they adopt something 10 years ago and they keep it.
Sure.
Maybe just one teacher uses it, and so it stays in their
How many
budget.
times have you been to a school
And
where you
over
see
and over.
they've had a pilot in the
Yeah.
school for 16 years?
Exactly. Exactly.
So-
to my point.
So this is, my only comment or suggestion for the department going forward, I think this is a good story. I appreciate the effort. I'm very pleased that, to hear that Marshall seems to be on a positive track. I think it would be more appropriate, with all due respect, next time for someone from the school to come and make the presentation.
I actually have somebody here for that,
Okay,
for a principal and some students
good.
who can make a comment about it.
Because I think it's very important that we kind of see the demonstration of ownership going forward, because that, to your point, is how this is going to become sustainable. At some point, you'll leave. At some point, you'll have done the work to kind of help provide the kind of processes and the kind of professional development that hopefully going forward, will be sustainable and become self-sustaining within the culture of the school and in that group of schools.
Dr. Ben, brief point. I don't know when we want to put this on the agenda. I'd very much like to, I'd like to engage the governor's office, education people, and legislature, leaders of committees there, what we've learned in the process of holding schools accountable and even in takeover our lead partners, what we've learned to date. Because one thing I don't want to miss, and it became very obvious about a year ago, there was no accident. All the schools that we took the biggest action with were high schools. And they're responsible for their young people when they're in the building, and they're responsible for that culture. But they didn't get in that trouble by accident. They're being fed general cultural issues and a school system issue. And I think our accountability law is fundamentally flawed when we take over a school or hold a school accountable and not the feeder system. So that particular one is, I think we learned it, we identified it. I don't know what we've done about it since then. I don't know if we've had engaged discussions with the other parts of the leadership in the state, but we're going to have to look at that very carefully to really get to this. And I'll be intrigued to see the systemic approach. And you got a train moving down the track here, and when it gets to the station, it's messed up, and you say, "Boy, this station's messed up." And
Well, they are. but-
Yeah, I understand.
But a lot of the problems probably could be avoided. Look at the 7th grade math performance as an example. That wasn't created by the high school.
It's hard to fix that in September.
It's very, very hard to fix that.
Not that we shouldn't get onto it, but it's. So I just think there's probably, as a board, at some point, we ought to say, what have we learned from this? What are the biggest things that, because until we actually implemented the law, we had the courage to actually do the thing and hold it accountable. It was hard to learn these things like we've learned them.
You know,
And
Dan,
we
and
need to do something about it.
I can't, that is an absolute, that's an incredible point, because let's not forget that amidst of doing this, and during this process, when Dr. White came forward, and again, I want to, we made this comment during the public hearing. Dr. White brought forth a very compelling proposal of his own. But your point about accountability outside the school level, we have folks sitting in this room that accused us of being so draconian we just wanted to take over districts. And we were trying to take over all these schools. No.
Over a couple of test scores.
Yeah, over a couple of test scores. And the fact is, what we hear today is that when we engage in true systemic change, we begin to see results. But the fact is, for a myriad of reasons, and I won't get into whose fault, because I mean there could always be a lot of fingers pointed in this direction as well. We allowed these things to happen over time. And until we took a strong stand, and I'm going to say this board took a strong stand on this particular issue. And again, Mike, I'm going to go right back to what you said, and we drew a line in the sand. It not only had a positive impact on the students of our turnaround academies, but let's talk about Broad Ripple. You know, we see now what's going on at Marshall. We see what's going on at Marion. So I think this discussion about school accountability, Dan, is really the one that I hope we go forward with and talk about how do we drive systemic change. And I do think it's there's a strong argument against systemic change can happen one building at a time. You have to have an organizational lever to pull to create systemic change. And I think that's what is so very nice about this particular model that, again, I want to give Dr. White all the credit in the world that he brought forward at our public hearing as a potential, as a potential model for schools in our state and our country. So.
You look at, in these 14 schools, if you really look at the mobility, some schools have as much as 400% mobility, but it's between schools.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't attack all of the schools at one time consistently, you're really
It's within regions of the city. Really.
Yeah, exactly. So, and this is true. I know this, by the way, I was at John Marshall High School the night that we received the blue ribbon back in 1984, 7, whatever the number was. So, you know, it's of real interest personally to me that we can pull this off. It's a great school and great teachers and administrators.
So we have some Marshall
Do we
folks
have a
here.
Principal? Okay. Both of them are here. Both principals and some students, let them give some reflection.
Sure. Please. No, come up here to the mic, please.
Good morning, I'm Chad Gray, one of the two co-principals at John Marshall. Thank you for having us here. We brought a couple of students with us that have been at John Marshall, one since 6th grade, one since the beginning of his freshman year. I know that we covered data, talked about the 5 of 9, and I can just say this is my 4th year at John Marshall. I was an assistant principal there for 3 years prior to this year. One thing that I can say, and I hear comments and differences in this whole turnaround and this whole makeover of a school is it is a challenging thing. And there's not a proven path that leads to success for every school. If there were, that person would be running every school. And we've experienced our highs and our lows in this. This year, difference from before. Working with Voyager as a single operator versus having multiple partners has really been a benefit to us because you don't have alignment issues where you've got one person in that's working on, well, we need to really improve this aspect, and you've got somebody else who's attacking a different thing, and the ideas that they have, trying to mesh them together, that's a challenge. We've not experienced that as much this year, having one group in, and I know that Dr. Johnson mentioned Howie Knopf and Project Achieve. One of the nice things is working with Voyager, and when we identify that this student services and student support piece needs picked up and where we're experiencing challenges, I think that if you look at most of our data, you would see that we experience challenges with special ed children, with more identified as emotional disabilities, both academic and behaviorally, and trying to get expertise to help address those problems. And that's where Voyager says, well, we know Howie Knopf is an expert in this area, and working to expand a partnership out from there versus two separate people coming in and colliding in motion has been a big change that's been a benefit this year. I also think that we're working on developing systems that are going to last, and establishing concepts and building a lot of that in the school culture aspect. That culture is a key to success and building that. And I know that students with pride in activities, and that's part of the reason that these gentlemen came. And I'm going to let them speak a minute just about kind of the growth in John Marshall as student-centered in those activities. One other thing I think that John Marshall has experienced that's a unique challenge in our journey is last year was the first graduating class with John Marshall returning to a high school. So John Marshall was a high school up until 1984, and then became a middle school, and now that transitioned back. These guys that we have with us, they're developing traditions that most high schools have in place. Existing high schools have those things, and the challenges that come with developing those new traditions when you redevelop into a high school.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jamal Ware. I'm a senior at John Marshall. And first off, I want to say I've never been more proud of my school. I like the direction we're going in. I've been in martial ever since it was 6th grade. I started in my 6th grade year, and it's really been a journey. The first thing is, in 6th grade, like, I never had nothing bad to say about my school because I went there, but now I actually have pride, and only thing I really participated in since 6th grade was sports. Like, that's the only thing that I felt comfortable doing. But now, it's a lot better because I feel that we have support from our principals. We have more partnerships. I actually feel like I'm in high school now. Like, one of the partnerships we have with IUPUI, one thing that we have an opportunity to do is SPAN 6. It's a college opportunity that was given by IUPUI, and they chose Marshall, where we get 2 classes for free. It's like we get to go on campus and take the classes, get a head start, so we already know it's like it's not overwhelming when we start. And another thing is, like, we have more freedom. We not always having to walk to the. We don't have to be walked to the bathroom, and I feel that we earned that. And it's not like it's something that
In the old days,
we take advantage of, but we don't take advantage of it in a bad way. And I want to thank our principals for giving us the opportunity to do more things. Like this year, we had a homecoming parade. I don't know if anyone heard of it. We had a homecoming parade for football, and we had the fire marshals out. We had like Corvettes. We did many different things. That's like trying to get the community involved. Our community liaison, I don't know if she could hear the tour. She provide a lot of opportunities. Like if we don't have stuff, they also would, instead of only think about our academics, they think of us as people. Like if we don't have coats, they do that for us. We need book bags, school supplies, and it's like a loving environment. They adhere to our needs personally and educationally, and that's just one of the things that I like. And thanks for coming to listen.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Donald Morris, and I'm a senior at John Marshall. I've been there since freshman year, and when I was a freshman, it was like, school was just to come and play around, and I really got serious about school then because I was like, yeah, whatever. My mom kicked me out of school, might as well. So I came and I played around, and like they really didn't discipline me for joking around or nothing like that, and so I really didn't take it serious. But as the years progressed, it got stricter and more disciplined, and the teachers, they started actually pushing you to your full potential, not letting you slack on your work and things like that. And me personally, I was a trouble student. Now I'm ranked 11 in the top 30 or whatever. I would have been higher, but complications had happened. But yeah, I'm going to be higher by next year. But anyways, like the teachers now, they care more about you than any of the previous years I've been there. And compared to last year, the students, like Jamal said, we had to be walked to the bathrooms and stuff like that. And when they tried to take the escorts away and let us go by ourselves, they abused the right of that by doing things they weren't supposed to. And the result of that, making things more strict. So this year, they're actually, putting their trust into us and seeing that those students who abused the rights from last year are now going to a whole new community of students who actually want to come to school and get their education and learn, and don't want to just come because they have nowhere else to go during the morning. They want to actually come to learn. And I say that we're more involved in everything. Like, up until last year, I really didn't participate in those school activities. I used to go to school and go home and either sleep or go run the streets or whatever. But I got into sports last year, and now I'm into sports and like government, student council and all this stuff like that, yearbook and things like that. And I spend every hour at school. I don't leave school until about 8 o'clock, like every night. I'm always at school helping out and stuff like that. And now this year, the principals, they come to me first mostly all the time and ask me, to speak about the school or do something with the underclassmen or, go and help things. And I'd be like, that's just volunteer me, I didn't know nothing about it. And they'll tell me, you used to be like these students and you have made a remarkable change and we want you to, explain your story and stuff like that. And I just say John Marshall needs to, stay like it is, because with John Marshall is a school for people to come and actually make change. It's not like all the other IPS schools. It's like smaller classes and the teachers can have more one-on-one time with you. Whereas at tech or something, it's 40 to 50 people in one class and you can't get the time you need to talk to the teacher because everybody else needs time to talk to the teacher. And the teachers here, now they're giving up more of their personal time to come and tutor you and help out everyone else. And they will refuse you an answer from you saying no or you can't do it. They say you can do it. You're just not trying hard enough. Just try. I'm here with you. I'm going to be here 100% of the way with you. And a few teachers that I've known since 9th grade that's still at Marshall, they still push me to do my best. At first I wasn't thinking about, going off to college or whatever, but they told me, you don't want to live in the ghetto the rest of your life. You want to take your mom out of that and, you want to be more than everyone was before. And that actually opened my eyes and made me want to do better and strive to, go to college. And now I'm accepted to 13 colleges, so all over the United States. So, I just look back and say, I wish I would have, made smarter decisions in my previous years and could have been like it was this year. It's wonder where I would have been then. But overall, John Marshall is a great school, and I'm proud of that school. And I'm glad I didn't transfer out to a different school.
We're proud of you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Matt Davis. I'm a teacher at John Marshall. I've been there for 4 years. Taught in the middle school for 4 years. It is a completely different place today than it was 4 years ago. I can remember my first couple of days there. I left like a first-year teacher going home shell-shocked at the end of every day at what's gone on. The changes that have been made in the past 4 years have been tremendous. The growth not only in the staff, but especially in the students. The point where these two gentlemen just came up and spoke very eloquently about the changes that have been made and about the pride they have in the school speaks more than anything else that I can think of. Because when I got there was no pride in John Marshall. When you talk to students about, what do you want people to think of your school, they didn't care. To have these two gentlemen come up, as nervous as they are, to come up in front of this and to say what they've said speaks tremendously for the changes that have been made at John Marshall. I've also been there through probably 4 different lead partners that have been there in the past few years, and I will say the Voyager is by far the best that I've had the ability to work with. All the other lead partners I felt have come in and said, this is an area that needs change, this is what you need to do, and then they leave. And we'll see them a month at the next meeting that we have with them. Voyager is at our school every day. When they come to me, I'm also the project manager for Extended Day. When they come to me and say, Matt, we think that we need to make this change in Extended Day. How can we help you make this change? And we have a meeting and we come up with a plan, and they're there with me the entire time to come up with a change and to come up with the plan that we need moving forward. So I think the way that we have things set up right now has been beneficial to the community, to the students. At IPS, we have a belief that children come first, and I believe that the process we have in place now truly does put our students first. And I think that any change that might be made, unfortunately, would be a detriment to our students, because the next few months of school would be a waste for them. And I don't want to see that. I want to see our kids have the success that these two gentlemen have that have shown. So I encourage you to continue with the plan that we have in place. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. I'll be brief. Brian Dickens, co-principal, proud co-principal. When I look at them, that's why we do what we do every day. wife's pregnant with a new baby. Took her shopping all over the city, and random people that ask, what do you do? And I say, well, I'm a co-principal at John Marshall. Oh my God, John Marshall. I say, no, it's a new John Marshall. And the thing I get excited about, also have attended John Marshall, I know what Pride and Excellence provides, not only through academics and extracurricular activities, but through student ownership, through accountability. You know, often we frown at challenge and adversity, but I think it has allowed us to evaluate what we do while we do it. And we're seeing significant change, not only from the families, but community members are now taking partnership in what we're doing every day. And so, you know, we know that the foundation is being laid, but we're excited about what is to come. And we're talking about consistency. These two gentlemen are only a small number of the many students who are now saying, can we go see our counselor? We want to go to IUPUI. We want to go to Ivy Tech. We want to go and see these colleges. We want to have, so the culture is changing. And so just an excitement about what is to come. They will lead us. The children are leading us, and we're following them. So, and one last thing, they didn't speak to it, but many of the young people who have come from the different schools in the community, from the Arlingtons and the Howes, if you can talk to them about the pride and that they have in their school, it is something like I've never seen before. And I'm very appreciative of them becoming a family amongst themselves and not allowing the differences to keep them separated. So we're excited. We're excited. We're excited about what the school's going to do for the community also. Having walked there, grown up in that, and dealing with some of the same challenges, it's exciting to see where we're headed. And also we have Core Pastor Duncan, who's going to come and talk briefly about some of the community partners.
My name is Corey Duncan. I am the Associate Pastor of Youth at New Beginnings Fellowship Church, which is a church that's located in the same community as John Marshall. And we've taken an interest this year in partnering with John Marshall to make it so that they can maximize their potential and achieve a success on parallel. So far, we've done things like we've attended strategic planning meetings for school turnaround. Our men have been present inside of the building during school hours as well as sporting events. And we've even partnered in providing haircuts for some of the kids just so that they can boost their self-esteem. One thing that I'm really excited about, Dr. Tony Evans, who's a pastor in Dallas, Texas, they have a wonderful adopted school program where they're currently in 70 schools. We're currently putting together a team to go attend their training events so that we can come back and definitely adopt not just John Marshall, but also, as you said earlier, the feeder schools, the elementary schools, the junior high schools that feed into the school. So once again, it can be a school of pride and excellence. I have a vested interest in that. I attended John Marshall. I remember Carol Craig was the principal, and her theme back then was pride and excellence. And we just look forward to helping the school get back to a place where it is a place of pride and everything is done with the spirit of excellence. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Well, again, I want to thank everyone who was part of the presentation about Marshall. It's great. You know, I think, Dave, I said we have trouble sometimes knowing whether we're winning or losing. I think in this one we can say we're winning. But the reason we're winning is I think these kids are showing us they're winning. And that's the true measure. Jim, you want to go ahead? You have anything else? Our next discussion item is on the age of compulsory school attendance.
That and the NASB membership were both items that Tony Walker asked to be placed
Sure.
on the agenda, so I would just turn it over to him.
And I'll be fast. I just want to say I had a couple of conversations with superintendents in Porter and LaPorte County. And those of you that are educators probably already know this. I'm not sure how pervasive this is, but one of the biggest issues that they raised to me was the fact that in too many instances they're spending first, second, and maybe part of third grade just catching students up. That students are presenting the first day of school behind where they should be for first grade. And I'm not sure to what extent that is something that's going on across the state, but I just wanted to prompt the board as well as the department to start taking a look at this and maybe have some consideration to moving toward what I feel we should have is kindergarten for all fifth graders. I mean, I just look across the room, probably everyone in the room here wouldn't have a 5-year-old son or grandchild that they wouldn't have in the kindergarten somewhere. And I think that should be the standard for this state. And the idea that you don't have to start school till you're 7 years old is just behind the times. So I'm not sure how things get jumped off around here, but I'd like to just put that out for consideration. And in addition to that, on the NASB issue, I'd just like to make a motion that the Indiana State Board of Education rejoin NASB with full membership. That's my motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
John, I think we just need to know the cost of that.
About
That was part
$30,000.
of the materials. that you
Yeah.
got.
31,000.
$31,000.
And part of that 31,000 not only covers membership, but it also covers some traveling expenses, is that correct? And you know, my question back is, I remember when we first jumped out of that, and I attended some NASB activities, and I will say that several of them that I attended were very good. But I think some of that 31,000, if I'm not wrong, is used for travel reimbursement.
Correct.
So it's not just a member. My question back to this board, and Tony, I appreciate when you and Todd came back in and you were looking at the cost and where we were spending our dollars, one of the decisions that was made was to pull our membership out of NASB. So my question is, does the is it the $31,000, is that membership plus travel? Because a lot of times, such as when I first started this thing, we had NASB come in and do some, we had NASB come in and do some training for us, and they did a nice job. My question was, does that 31,000 take care of that training, or is it 31,000 plus their expenses to come and do that training?
Mike, I'm going to try to answer this as best I can. I may not have this again totally right, because I know NASB and CCSSO do things very similar in terms of their structure. CCSSO, for the folks out there, is a Council for Chief State School Officers. And when you belong to one of those organizations, part of your fee is for specified travel. There is a legislative conference or something like that as a state school chief that's paid for. Not all of your travel is, okay? So I think what you have in front of you probably spells out what the membership fee covers, because it is not a blanket that all of your travel is covered for all activities. I just want to say that. The other thing, and I think this is the discussion that many organizations like this are having, and I'm going to be on this particular issue because we're talking about obligating funds. I will probably not vote on this if it is taken to a vote. But I would tell you that one of the discussions we had was, is it more cost effective to go to the organization and ask what the true membership fee is, and then get your own travel and your own accommodations? Because in some of these situations, I have learned, it is easier, and it is not only easier, but it is more cost effective to book your own travel through Expedia, Travelocity, or one of the online agencies, or one of the online companies. So I just want to say that was a consideration.
Sure.
But I think the information you have in front of you, Mike, kind of spells out what is covered and what isn't.
The $31,000, Mike, includes $5,000 of professional development account money, which you can spend on conferences. You have the option to opt out of that and deduct $5,000 from the membership fee, which would be, like Dr. Bennett was saying, then you would pay for everything, any conferences you attended. Nothing would be covered by NASB.
And it's my understanding, Mike, if you look at the flyer that they provided us, for instance, the Common Core Standards meeting on January 24th, this is an expense that NASB will pay for a board member to attend that I think does not come out of our professional development account.
That's correct.
Yeah, this is an addition to this, because this one, the way I'm reading that one is, they're going to invite someone from each state, no matter if you're a
Correct.
NASB member or not.
Well, you have to be a NASB member.
I don't think so.
Oh, no?
Not on this one.
Sorry.
Not on this one.
What are it's a huge amount of money, and I'm just wondering, in a kind of cost benefit way, what have we missed by not being members. I just don't know, Joe. You
Yeah,
feel strongly about this, I
I'm
know,
very
but
strongly supporting it, because what you miss is what's going on in the federal side, and what's going on, for example, in Park and Common Core. There's lots of statewide hearsay, but you're there at the table with the legislators that develop that policy, or you have the opportunity to meet with them. You have the opportunity to get on study committees, for example, what Voyager is doing, and bring things to the national level and share it to other state boards. I feel like it's a way to share what we've learned and learn what other people are doing better than we're doing.
And I'll just chime in too, because I did attend their new board member institute, and it was very helpful, I felt, to actually sit down and have a 2 or 3 day period to just talk with other state board members about the issues they're confronting, policy issues, as well as just procedural things, and to share best practices.
I tell you, though, the one, I attended 2. I participated in a study that talked about dropouts from a national level. And that still has impacted me, just, I think, back what Tony was talking about. And the second thing is, Joe, you and I were involved with the very beginning discussions of the Common Core in NASB. And when I say that, I'm probably saying, how time passes. I bet 4 or 5 years ago. So it keeps you abreast on that stuff. And so we were involved in those discussions when they were just at the very beginning stages.
My leaning is just, we ought to know what we're doing. If we're gonna take 30-some thousand or whatever it ends up being. We had a discussion about organized abandonment. Some things we just keep spending money. So if we add this on, we'll be taking away. We have a lot of focused needs here. I want to make sure I know if we're taking.
Is there a timeline?
I've had it. I just.
Is there a specific timeline to make this decision? Because what I think we could do, and I don't want to speak for Mr. Ritz, but I think what you could do is actually ask NASB to come in and do a presentation to you about what the membership actually entails and the services they would provide.
And what we're spending money on, what we would take it away from, and then we can make a decision on. Because it isn't like there's money just laying around, we're looking to spend it. So
I assume we can only make a recommendation, right? We can't actually spend the money.
Right.
I guess it's.
Yeah, there's no sense bonding NASB if the board isn't going to participate, though.
But this is the time, I guess we're doing a budget, this would be the time to try to put something into the budget to pay for the, well, I think, Tony, that's a good suggestion. It would be useful to have them come. I'm not suggesting that we don't need some, it would be useful to have some kind of regular source of information and kind of intelligence about what's happening around the country. I just wonder if there are more effective or efficient ways of getting that information than what NASB charges.
I do want to chime in that I was on the legislative, as a legislative liaison. You get when you come representing a state, there are 28 or 32 states represented, and they have 3 or 4 committees. And when you get on a legislative committee or a policy committee, you actually work to develop national policy. And so you can bring it back and discuss it with your superintendent and match it up with CCSSO, but I agree with you about waiting.
Well, and let me share, I'll share this with the board, and it was probably something that, I know I've never shared out publicly. I actually considered dropping out of CCSSO because at the time they were advocating specific issues that I personally, that this board did not pursue, and that I did not personally agree with. And I had a pretty strong conversation with Gene Wilhoit about that, and in doing so, I decided to stay, and I'm now on their board. But it was because I was able to learn and what the organization intended to do on specific policy issues. And I think when you have them in here, I think it's very fair for you to ask what they advocate for on those very specific policy issues, because the truth is, if the organization is not advocating for the direction of this board, you put yourself in a very difficult position. And that was actually what prompted my discussion with Gene about my continuation in CCSSO, is we were advocating, CCSSO was advocating on certain issues that I philosophically disagreed with, and frankly, there was no discussion with the membership prior to going to Capitol Hill to do that. And so I think that the discussion needs to be not only a presentation from NASB, but I also think you need to ask NASB where they stand on issues that this board has advocated for. Because if it is not consistent, then I do think you have a question you should ask yourself: is does it benefit you to be in the organization?
Well said.
That's the point. Whoever shows up determines the agenda.
So, Joe, you had made a motion. Do you want to back that off? Oh, you made the motion.
Yeah. I think I may have lost my second. I'm not sure.
No, I'm still holding on.
Okay, well, yeah.
I think we should take it to a vote, because I still
Roll
support
call.
we should be a part of that for the reasons Tony said, on a different level. I don't think 31,000 for this kind of a commitment is a large amount. I even think perhaps we could get a donor. And if that's something we want to table to consider, we can do that. If it's the money, I think that's.
Well, I think the new superintendent ought to weigh in, because make sure that the department and the board together would use the resource, if we decide it's a good resource. And someone suggested a presentation before we
Yeah, that's a
move.
good idea. One thing that I would like to say is, in the past, there have been some really good opportunities, and I have gone on my own, and I've found people who would support me to go. And so we don't have to be a member. I do think it's important to be a member, to have a voice, because you cannot be on the committees.
I think Dan makes a good point. I'd like to ask my colleague to consider withdrawing the motion to resubmit it next month or in March at the latest, and to, in the meantime, give the new superintendent an opportunity to consider, and certainly she's here, she's listening to this conversation, she hears the interests of the board, so I would assume that, that they could look into what they think of NASB, look into the budget, and maybe get them out here in February or March to do a presentation. And so I'm not suggesting we don't pursue this, but I think it would probably be appropriate to delay. So I don't know how you feel about that. If you want to go ahead and continue, that's all right. But
No, they did actually offer to send someone to this meeting, but I guess I should have taken them up on it. And to Tony's point, there are policy differences. That's one of the things I discovered there. I mean, you have almost all the states represented. I don't think that we should shy away from that. I mean, that's even more of an opportunity for us to have our positions heard and talk about what we've done here in Indiana, which were very well received at the meeting I was at. With that being considered and hearing the discussion, I withdraw the motion.
May I make a motion for Tony to go, if this is?
No, I'm not available to go to that, but I do hope someone will go.
Okay.
thank you.
Next item is the consent agenda.
Move adoption.
But before we go on, Mr. Chairman, is someone available to go? There is a free spot for someone to go to the Common Core.
Joe, I think Joe.
Joe, great.
So consent agenda, Dave?
Move adoption.
We have adoption, motion to adopt. We have a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The next is adjudication of.
Hey, Tony, I'd like to enter just a comment on what we've sat here and listened to for a little while here, because it has bearing on where we go from here. We heard some great lessons learned for this state here with the appearance of these young people here, and seeing the results of what Jim and his people have achieved in these turnaround schools. And that's quite different for how Indiana has approached education in the past. As we go forward, one of the reasons I was asked to serve on this board was to provide the business perspective of it. We have a huge need to accelerate what we're doing in career and technical education, not only in career and tech ed, but also in adult education for those people who who are out there, and we have roughly a million people that are literacy deficient that could not work in a high-skill, high-tech environment. So I think we're going to have to learn a new way to deliver that type of education, technology and healthcare, the difficult stuff to deliver, because if we're a rural state, we're never going to be able to have enough skilled teachers in all of the rural areas that you need the expertise, particularly when you have small groups and special ed. Alternative school class and just delivering a GED is no longer the answer to our prayers. So I think there are great lessons to learn from what these people have done through doing things differently, and then bringing some outside expertise, because we surely don't have all the answers here. That's been proven to us time and time again. So as we move forward, that's going to be a great challenge for this board and everybody in the audience and all of our school people. So I think we need to keep an eye and a recollection of everything that we've learned as we move forward and apply it to what needs to be done as we go forward.
Thank you, Jim. So we move to the action portion, the action items on the agenda, and the first is adjudication, termination of special ed grant withholding from Indianapolis Public Schools. Matt, I would ask that you come up here, because I just want to be certain we do this the right way. I know in previous board meetings I have recused myself from this portion of the discussion. Is that necessary here?
It is.
Okay. So I will ask Mr. Pickett to please take over, and I'll step out until this is over.
The first one is IPS, which will be handled just like last month, because this is, the recommendation has been made. IPS has responded concurring with the amount withheld. You've been provided with copies of all the documents, and Mr. Chairman, if you would just take a action on that, as there is no disagreement.
Okay, so IPS has concurred with the recommendation from the department.
Correct.
Yeah,
So
we're in agreement.
that being the case, we need a motion. Okay, so we need a motion
So
to
moved.
accept. Thank you.
Second.
Okay, so there's now a seconded motion to approve the department's recommendation, which has the concurrence of IPS regarding the amount of special ed funds to be withheld. Any further comments or discussion? Hearing none, I ask for a vote. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. Okay, so the IPS matter is now complete. Thank you. Okay, in terms of Gary, I think...
There has not been any concurrence.
Right.
Gary has asked for a continuance, and you will need to conduct start the administrative proceeding like we've done before.
Okay, so I will begin the administrative proceeding. So this is the administrative proceeding conducted pursuant to Indiana Code 20-31-9.5-3 to determine the amount of state special education tuition support to be withheld from the state tuition support that would otherwise be distributed to the Gary Community School Corporation from January 1st to June 30th, 2013, to be used for the operation of the Turnaround Academy. The reference number for this proceeding is 08-012013. Board members received a copy of the Notice of Recommendation and Administrative Proceeding and the Department's withholding recommendation that was provided to Dr. Pruitt on December 21st, 2012. Board members also received a copy of Gary's response to the Department's recommendation. This is an informal proceeding. We'll first address Gary's request that this matter be continued. Attorney Coleman, on behalf of the Gary School Corporation, has asked for a continuance to allow Gary time to verify the number of special education students reported by Theodore Roosevelt Career and Technical Academy. Attorney Coleman, is that correct that you've requested? Would you like to make a brief statement?
Yes. Good afternoon again. Gary Community School Corporation, we received the information on December 21st, and it was during the holiday, which gave us insufficient time to confirm the numbers and review it. When we received the determination in November, what was specifically said is that we would have to determine what the special education count was. So due to the fact that we received it on December 21st, there was insufficient time for us to communicate with the officials that we would need to confirm it. We would just ask for additional time so that the school corporation has sufficient time and opportunity to verify that count.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Question?
Yes, go ahead.
Matt, Jim, what's the department's position on continuance?
Well, we're about to get to that.
The department would object to any continuance. The amount to be withheld in this case is formulaic in nature. The number of students times the foundation amount. I'm not sure what additional information Attorney Coleman will need to verify. We provided a spreadsheet to her with these counts. We've also gone through these counts to make sure that none of these students are double counted, just to ensure the accuracy of the information.
Is there any question about the status of a particular student being special ed or not, or is that again?
To my understanding, there hasn't been any evidence raised by Attorney Coleman regarding any particular student or groups of students, whether they're double counting or the accuracy of the information.
Attorney Coleman, would you like to make any other comment?
Yes, we did not receive the spreadsheet actually until December 31st. And so we have no opportunity to go through those numbers. And it's also our understanding that some of the students may have received a waiver that they were not to be classified as special education. So because of those issues and also the timeliness of the information that we have received to give our school corporation due process to thoroughly investigate these numbers and also to investigate the students who they are classifying as special education, we need additional time, and especially in light of the spreadsheet with the numbers being provided on December 31st.
Question, Neil, this
Go
is
ahead,
more maybe for you, Becky. Isn't special ed counts supposed to be up to date all the time in terms of funding purposes anyway? So there shouldn't.
There's a single count date, December 1, for funding purposes, and those are the numbers that the department has used.
But what we're saying, the count date is December 1, but
Right.
the reports aren't due, I mean, they aren't due December 1. The count date's December 1. So the department may not get that information until...
The reports have all been submitted and they've all been reconciled.
Right, but not necessarily as of December 1.
Yes, they've been, yes. You just approved the count in your consent agenda.
Right, I understand that, but
So the
what
counts are
I'm,
done.
for her, but I'm just saying, I'm looking on both sides. The school takes the count on December 1.
Right.
But we also have schools, we also have a period of time before that's finalized and submitted to the state.
And I believe the deadline for that was December 16th.
Okay.
Because otherwise you could not have the report to approve yet.
Sure, that's what I'm saying.
Yes.
So I'm just saying, could she have had the report earlier? The reality is, of all the different things that are going on, that's really not finalized until we get that submitted to the 16th.
Attorney Coleman, do you really anticipate that there'll be any change, or do you really feel that there's a substantive issue here?
Yes, based on the waiver issue. And the Gary Community School Corporation, we have cooperated in good faith. In November, we did agree and allow those numbers to go through. But at this time, we can't just consent to it without having an opportunity to thoroughly investigate it, especially in light that the report of the notice was given December 21st, and also the spreadsheet wasn't given until December 31st. And if there's an opportunity that we can agree on it, we will have no problem to submit our recommendation saying that, but we just need time to investigate.
Mr. Boers, what are the implications, if any, of continuing this matter till next month?
Well, my understanding is that the turnaround academies need this special money immediately. And to Attorney Coleman's point of respect, The notice provided that, this is the first time that I've heard anything about a waiver issue. The notice specifically provided that any evidence that they have to rebut the recommendation of the department needed to be submitted prior to the state board meeting, and my understanding is we haven't received any information.
Would there, if the funds are withheld today and passed along to the Turnaround Academy, if for some reason Gary does find a discrepancy or does choose to challenge next month, is that something that could be accommodated, or would that be difficult to do?
You know, unfortunately, I'm not sure I know the answer to that.
Subject to judicial review.
What's the average that they have had in the past of waivers? I mean, how often?
I don't know what the waiver situation, what that means, Jill.
Right.
I've not heard what that means.
It just seems odd that, you know, the 16th was the appeal deadline, or, you know, the report deadline, and now we're revisiting the deadline that we already gave them 2 weeks, you know, December 1st through December 16th. So I would call for a motion to withhold. It seems like otherwise we're just dragging it on through a legal process.
Well, that is the first determination. The first determination is whether or not we are amenable to Gary's request for continuance, and if not, then we'll move to the actual substance of the decision. So, can I get a feel from my colleagues about whether, yeah, Tony?
Yeah, question. Jim, can you or someone from the department explain this waiver issue?
I apologize. I'm unclear about what waiver issue she's discussing that would be affecting the special education count, so I would need explanation from Gary Community Schools on the waiver issue that you're addressing.
And that's where our concern is, that more time is needed so we all can discuss these issues. As you can imagine, trying to discuss it during this period of time when most offices were closed, it was difficult. So what the plan for some students who were classified as special education would not be considered special education, they would be considered general education. And the reason why we would like the continuance versus this board distributing funding, as we know, there's a lot of issues with how these numbers are being calculated. And the Gary Community School Corporation definitely has to be fiscally concerned with the large amounts of money that continue to be diverted from the school corporation. And also in the letter, I mentioned the $2.8 million that we believe the Gary Community School Corporation is entitled to because of a miscalculation.
But that's,
So,
yeah,
Jill,
that's
Point,
not
we would
relevant,
just
right?
try to have the
So Tracy, on the waiver issue, because that was my question, are you saying that potentially there were students counted as special education students that are not in fact special education?
Yes, and that's what.
Okay, any response from the department on that?
Sure. The only way that a student who has been previously identified as having a disability can be dismissed from services is if the case conference committee through the evaluation process has determined that that student is no longer eligible for services. So there's nothing within the law that allows for a waiver for a student to then be dismissed and no longer be eligible, and that's through evaluation that's happened. It's also important to remember that the counts that were submitted, there was a count submitted by Gary Community Schools. There was also a count submitted by Gary Roosevelt. In terms of what information was given to Indianapolis Public Schools and Gary Community Schools to verify the accuracy, essentially, of the map, will show the number of students. Because of FERPA regulations, we could not provide specific students to Gary Community Schools or Indianapolis Public Schools to say X student who attends Gary Roosevelt was claimed. There would be direct FERPA violations in doing so. The only numbers we can provide are simply X amount of students who qualify at this funding level, and they can verify the map. But there is no waiver that would dismiss a student from services.
Did the department's reconciliation process include looking for any double counts?
Yes, the way that the numbers are submitted don't allow for a student to be counted twice in 2 different districts. It creates a conflict. Those all have to be resolved before the counts can be solidified and submitted to all.
And I would just like to add with the mention of FERPA, that also was the additional reason that we needed to go directly to the school to verify the information, because some of the information we needed from the department they could not provide. And because of the holiday, we were unable to communicate with the officials that we need to. And so we would just once again ask for the continuance of this matter. Thank you.
We don't need a formal vote. We need if there is consensus. I'm looking for my colleagues to let me know if there's consensus about moving ahead with this matter or continuing it. Just to start the ball rolling, I'll recommend that we move ahead and we not accept the request from Gary to continue, but I'm open to other alternatives. Okay, hearing none, I'm going to say that by consensus we've decided that Gary's request will not be accepted and that we're going to move ahead with the substance of the administrative process. So as the request for continuance has been denied, we'll proceed as follows. The sole issue before the board at this time is to determine the amount of state special education funds to be withheld from Gary Community Schools from January 1st through June 30th, 2013. A representative of the department will present the recommendation on the amount of state special education tuition support that should be withheld, and a representative, Gary, will then have the opportunity to present the school corporation's position on the recommendation. Information provided by the parties will be under oath. Board members may ask questions of the representatives. At the conclusions of the presentations and questions, board members will discuss and make a decision. The board's decision will be determined by an affirmative vote of at least 6 members. It is my understanding that Jim Larson will be presenting the department's recommendation. Can I ask who will be presenting on behalf of Gary? Will it be Attorney Coleman?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Do either of you have any questions before we begin? Okay. Jim, let me ask, actually, can I ask both of you to stand at the same time, just for efficiency? Attorney Coleman and Jim, do both of you solemnly swear or affirm under the penalty of perjury that the information you provide to the board during this proceeding is true and correct? Okay, thank you. Jim, go ahead and make your presentation, please.
Pursuant to Indiana Code 20-31-9.53C and 511 Indiana Administrative Code 6.2-9-4B, the department recommends the following amount be withheld from the state special education grant to be distributed to Gary Community School Corporation from January 1 to June 30, 2013, to be used for operation of the Turnaround Academy, Theodore Roosevelt Career and Technical Academy. The recommended amount represents the Turnaround Academy's December 1, 2012 special education child count, multiplied by the applicable categorical amount, and then prorated for 6 months. When combined with the previously mentioned amount withheld, the total amount of state tuition support, when factored together, the total amounts to be withheld from state special education grant for Theodore Roosevelt College Career and Technical Academy, $176,939.50.
Okay. Are there any questions from the board about the department's recommendation?
Calculated in the normal way and calculated in the same way you calculated IPS?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Jim. Attorney Coleman, do you have any response or
Yes.
presentation?
Thank you. Just based on that, I would ask that this board also be mindful and consider the case that was passed in Marion County, the Board of School Commissioners for the City of Indianapolis versus the Indiana State Board of Education and the Indiana Department of Education. Due to the funding issues, it's very crucial that this board looks at how these fundings are to be calculated. The Gary Community School Corporation, our superintendent, Dr. Pruitt, is working diligently to provide for the 9,000 students who have chosen to remain in the Gary Community School Corporation. And so therefore it's crucial, even though we recognize that Roosevelt is operating as a turnaround academy and there are approximately 600 students there, that we calculate every penny correctly. And so we would ask that no further monies be distributed until all of the formulas can be corrected by this board and the proper amount that's due and owing to the Gary Community School Corporation be returned. And so at this time, we ask that any monies to be appropriated would basically wait until Gary Community School Corporation is able to receive the funding that it's entitled to, which would be calculated over $2.8 million. And so at this time, even though my continuance has been denied, I would still ask this board to be mindful of that, to recognize that every dollar that Gary Community School Corporation receives is crucial and is needed. And because of some of these miscalculations, we will ask that no further monies be appropriated over to Edison until everything is corrected and the Gary Community School Corporation can properly receive the monies that it's entitled to. Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, the department would like to object to any reference to any previous adjudications that the board may have considered. As I indicated earlier today, the trial court has issued an opinion and the department's in the process of determining its appeal rights. So at this point, the only matter for the board is the adjudication on the special ed funding for this year.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Okay, thank you, Attorney Coleman, for your presentation. Thank you. We appreciate very much Superintendent Pruitt being here today and you taking the trip. And we understand your concerns. But as clearly stated, the question before the board has to do with the withholding of the special education funds for the period January 1st to June 30th, 2013. Are there any questions or further comments from the board before we move forward with the decision?
Question, maybe I missed this. What is the special education student count for Roosevelt?
That's a good question. It's not in the...
So as Nicole mentioned, there are multiple levels around which state special education is funded. So the student count for this particular funding stream varies by different levels. So I'll do the quick math so you don't have to listen to the breakout. But in total, there are, this is a math being done by a former English teacher, so forgive me for my delay, is 155 students, if my math serves me correctly.
155, and that's as of December 1st.
Well, it's important to remember that this count that you look at for purposes of APC is what we consider to be a duplicated count, because students who are speech only can also have another eligibility category and they get dual funded. So I apologize, the sheet I have with me has the breakdown, but I can absolutely pull for the board the unduplicated numbers. I simply just don't have that today. But that count will be fairly accurate, as for high schools, we don't typically see a lot of students in that speech-only category, so that count should be fairly accurate.
So there's somewhere between 77 and 155.
Well, I would need to look inside here about how many students are in the level 3 count. There are only 13 students, looks like, listed, who would be a speech-only student, who those 13 could be a duplicated count, meaning they may be included in both. So that number may be off by 13 students.
So the funding formula takes into account some students for maybe more than one.
If you're a student who has an eligibility category of something other than speech, and you also have speech, then in Indiana we fund that a bit differently than if you're a student who only has an eligibility category that does not include speech, which is why it's a duplicated count. Those 13 students may be in an APC level 1 or 2, as well as they're in that third level one.
So could you submit at some point, just for the record,
Sure.
the actual number?
Yes, absolutely.
Other questions? Can I please ask for a motion to support, to either support or not support the department's recommendation? The department's recommendation is that $176,939.50 be withheld to be provided to the Turnaround Academy.
I move that.
Okay. So there's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. So there's a seconded motion on the floor to support the department's recommendation regarding the withholding of $176,939.50 of state special education grant funding to be distributed to, or to be withheld from the Gary School Corporation in support of the Operation Turnaround Academy. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries. I believe that concludes the administrative proceeding. Thank you for your patience.
Becky, Becky, while we're waiting, item E, I may have missed paperwork on item E. Did it come out and I missed it?
Which one?
I thought I sent it, but I may not have.
Which one's E?
Summer school funding.
Summer school program funding. There's a link to it on the website, or I can email this to you right now, which would be easier.
Am I the only one that missed it? Everybody else get
I
it?
just had the categories.
You have it?
What I did.
Apparently you had to have hair to get it, because neither Mike or I did.
I'll send it real quick here.
Let me go ahead with item C while we do that. Come on up, Risa. And this is the approval of proposed final language for adjunct permit section of REPA 2. This is a result of the proposed changes that the amendments that the board suggested at the last meeting. So go ahead, Risa.
The board suggested last meeting that for the adjunct permit that we incorporate a pedagogy component that the teacher that's on the adjunct permit needs to complete, and that be a component that's very similar to what workplace specialist teachers complete as part of their program. So we took the list of topics that are covered, pedagogy topics that are covered in the workplace specialist program, which is called the Beginning Teacher Seminar, and we added those into the adjunct permit language, and that was provided to you and it's included in red. And we used a little bit more formal language, but we made sure that everything that's in the workplace specialist Beginning Teacher Seminar is included in the pedagogy language that we included here. We also added some language about literacy and reading for adolescent students due to the focus on reading instruction in Indiana. And it's up to the board, of course, if you want to keep that. That's not something that is specifically called out in the workplace specialist component, but we felt that it was a reasonable addition. And we also provided a section E that talks about various options for the delivery of this pedagogy component so that it doesn't tie individuals down to only one delivery system. We thought that you would like to see some options in how that pedagogy can be delivered to these individuals, so we included coursework professional development, school-based professional development, professional education organizations, and other organizations that are not affiliated with higher education that could put together a component that would meet these requirements and deliver that to these adjunct permit holders.
Any questions for Risa?
Yeah, on the Beginning Teacher Seminar, when it comes to the workplace specialist, do they have to start that immediately, or what is the issue of timing when it comes to the...
All workplace specialist licenses are issued in tiers. There's a workplace specialist 1 license that is the very first workplace specialist license they get, and it's only a 2-year license. During that first 2 years is when they must complete the Beginning Teacher Seminar. Once they've done that, then they proceed to a 5-year license. So the timing is that the adjunct permit, as it is written now, is initially it is a 5-year permit. So that's a little bit different than the workplace specialists that start out with this 2-year limitation.
And let me add, again, being former career and tech ed, in career and tech ed, which would be different than what we are I think we're proposing here with adjunct is in career and tech ed, and I'll use my old school. I actually had teachers that were not even college graduates. And I think that was, again, part of that belief is that while we had, a great guy teaching welding, he did not ever attend college. And I think that was the sense of urgency around those, helping folks who had not been part of any higher education, had not received higher education. So I would argue that the rationale between the two is kind of steeped in really the nature of career and tech ed and the type of the backgrounds of the individuals you attract that come to career and tech ed versus what we're affording through the adjunct permit. Hearing no questions, do we have a motion to approve the proposed final language? We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. I think we have Will here to talk about, this is to initiate rulemaking. So again, in the complexity of the rulemaking process, this is not final adoption. This is to initiate the process of rulemaking. And this is to kind of move forward in the preliminary discussion that Will had with the board at the December meeting regarding schools like Excel, and I see Mr. Bess here from Excel, and the Doors Academy, and some of these special schools that really don't fit inside our regular accountability system. So, Will, you want to take off on that?
Thank you, Dr. Bennett, and thank you to the board for the opportunity to speak this afternoon. As was mentioned, I'm here basically to continue the conversation that we started last month with you all to create and put in place this alternative accountability model for schools that are serving students who are in a phase of recovering after an initial dropout. We've submitted the proposed language to you all and are requesting for the initiation of the rulemaking process. I won't really go into the rule because it doesn't deviate significantly from the conversation we had last month. The idea is the concepts and the method. We basically put them into the language that will allow for the calculation of these additional grades. I would like to point out, though, two key areas that both allow for and require the opportunities to improve this model over time. I think that's an important feature of not only the alternative model, but the accountability system in general, is the opportunity to improve it as we learn more. And I think, Mr. Walker, you mentioned at one point, as schools perform and respond to their own measurement, essentially giving them new opportunities to continue to increase. So within this language, one, the board, just like with the standard model, is required each year to consider the targets, the ranges, et cetera, that determine whether or not schools receive bonuses and how the letter grades are ultimately calculated and the weighting of the components therein. Secondly, last month I described that we will, through the process of piloting this, learn more about the potential to add a bonus for that, the English and math assessments for what amounts to the equivalent of the 10th to 12th improvement that we have in the standard model. So there is language in here to allow the board to add that bonus based on what's observed. It's not required to add the bonus, but it is a possibility for that to be looked at. So those are two things I just wanted to draw your attention to. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions if you all have.
I make a motion that this go to rulemaking process.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Hearing none. Do we have any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. 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 Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Approval of summer school funding categories. Dre?
Good afternoon. Thanks, Dr. Bennett. I get the pleasure of bringing in the rear. Thanks, Becky. I'll make this quick. As you guys saw the memo there, I'm proposing that we approve the 3-category method, kind of classifies courses within category structures. We'll start out with category 1 being reimbursed at 105% if the appropriation allows, and then we'll proceed to category 2 and 3 based on what the districts are seeking. So with that, I ask for you guys' approval, very similar to what we had last year.
Now, similar, or how's it different if it's not the same?
No difference at all.
And just as a reminder, does it cascade so nothing is filled in 3 until 2 requests
Yes.
are done?
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
And if I recall, the last 2 years, we've been able to fund at 100% all 3 categories.
Move to adopt the department's
Great.
recommendation.
We have a motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Before we go to operations, I would ask the board to just, for a moment, recognize a person who on January 11th will be leaving when I leave. And she is one of those people in the department that, you know, we hear very frequently from the Jim Larsons, the Matt Boers, the Dale Chews. And over the last 4 years, what I've learned is as critical as these guys are and have been to great operations, there are support staff who, through the years, and I want to be very clear, predating me, going all the way back to when, if I'm not mistaken, when Dr. Evans was in office, Debbie Downing has staffed these meetings, has handled many of the administrative duties in my office regarding travel, reimbursement for travel, and that's many of the forms that you receive regarding your reimbursements, you can always look to Debbie. And Debbie is retiring from the department on January the 11th.
Wow.
And Debbie, would you please stand up, because I want to recognize you. There you see the importance of Debbie. One minute.
Nothing under board operations meeting first Wednesday of February.
Again,
Probably this room.
before we make a motion again, it's been my pleasure to serve you, to serve with you, to serve the children of this state. I wish you all the best. I wish Glenda the best in her new leadership role, and I look for nothing but great things from Indiana. Can we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion, second? All in favor? Aye.
Thank you, Tony.
Well, are you going to the other? Yeah, so take a credit.
Oh, you sure? I'd rather. Dave,